Hi guys, Archie Luxury, and who do I recommend in America? In America, who do I recommend for quality pre-owned wristwatches? David SW, David SW, David SW. Go to davidsw.com. He is the best, the greatest pre-owned dealer in all of the United States of America. David SW, David SW, David SW. Hi guys, Archie Luxury on the Paul Pluta channel. Guys, I'm doing paid review 21QB26, quick wristwatch check. And today I am wearing my Patek annual calendar, the 5035. Haven't worn this baby for a while. Put it on. Guys, today I'm doing a paid review here. And this was actually a consultancy I did for a guy, and it was a really interesting question. He's got a wristwatch collection you can see on the screen here. And what's he got? He's got quite a few modern Rolex. The question was, should he swap his Cermet for a vintage Rolex Submariner 1680? And I gotta tell you, looking at his collection here, I believe he was going to be offered, his Cermet is apparently stickers, never worn. He's been offered about 18,000 US dollars, and he'd have to put a couple $1,000 in. I think the 1680 was about 25,000 US dollars. Now, looking at his collection, I said to him, no, don't do that swap, don't do that deal. And the reason I said that, why did I say that? I said that because vintage is very hard. There's so much damage that can go wrong. I said, if you want to get out of something, get rid of the garbage. The garbage in his case would be the PAM, the Grand Seiko, and the Tudor GMT. Now, I got to tell you, this guy had an excuse for everything. Like, oh no, can't get rid of that. Oh no, the Tudor is my beater. Oh no, I can't get rid of the Omega. Well, man, you paid big bucks for advice. And what I said to him is, why would you get rid of the Cermet? And he tells me, I got the Cermet at retail. Like, what sort of difference does that make? I said, you have been given the gift from God. And what do you want to do? You want to race out there and trade it in and capitalize on the gain. And I got to be completely frank with you. I don't think it is really capitalizing on the game. I think it's a stupid move to do. And the reason I said this is, I said, you're looking at your collection, you've got a Kermit, that's the pre-ceramic, the proper Kermit. You've got a Zenith Daytona, you've got a Pepsi, Deep Sea, you've got a Batgirl, you've got a Sky Dweller. Those are really quite, I mean, let's be completely frank and honest there. The star of the show is the Cermet. That's the most, look, I could say the Zenith Daytona is probably the most valuable, but the Cermet is a modern classic. The Deep Sea he's got there, that's a bit soft. It's kind of a bit doggy, a bit big. Nobody really loves it at the moment. I think it's a great sleeper. The Bruce Wayne's a great watch. However, is the Bruce Wayne better than the Cermet? No way in the world, man. It's not in the same league. It's not in the same league as the Cermet. And I'm being completely honest with you. I'm a guy who's got a steel sub date and the 41 mil. So I know all about the latest the latest and greatest. My advice to him, if he's going to trade it in, I'd go to this guy's in New York, America. Go to David SW. You want to get a fair price for your Cermet, I'd sell it to David SW. Would I buy vintage? And I said to him, vintage is a minefield. This is the problem. I said, the problem is getting a 1680. It's naked. No box or papers. Apparently, it's got the original bracelet, you know, that crappy folded garbage. Look, I said to him, vintage is so hard. The big question is the red dial original? Is it not because there were so many super fake red sub dials. I mean, it is a absolute minefield. Vintage is very, very hard. And, I told him a story. I had a friend of mine who had a 5513. And he decided, you know what, I'll send it to Rolex for servicing. They changed the dial, the hands, and he said, you know, the bracelet's a bit ratty. So what did he do? He let them keep the old one and he bought a new bracelet. Complete stupidity, supreme. And that's the problem. Rolex doesn't know how to handle. So anyone who inherits this watch, they'd probably say, oh, let's send it to Rolex. I was told it was valuable. And Rolex would bring it up to new spec, which it's completely killed the value. My advice to him, and I told him this pretty blunt and pretty straight, I said, if you want to buy vintage, I would buy classic. Classic. And what's classic? Classic is pre-ceramic. Pre-ceramic, you're talking about pieces from the 90s and 2000s. I am talking five-digit Rolex models there. I'm talking Sapphire Submariner, a 16610. I'm talking no date, that's the 14060. I'm talking Explorer 1's 14270. I am talking, Explorer 2 16570, GMTs 16700, 16710s. That's what I'm talking about. I said vintage like plastic vintage. That is a very hard thing to scope out. It depends on trust and the dealer. Personally, I said 25,000 for a 1680 seems to be quite, in my opinion, it's fairly high. I think it's a high price. But I got to be honest with you there. To be honest with you, I honestly think you're getting out of a very hot model. The Cermet, just because you managed to get one, go and buy another one. Go and see how easy it is to get another one. And I think he's just had good luck with his AD. He's managed to get a couple, what's the hard watches to get? Okay, he's got the Pepsi, yes, that's hard to get. And the Cermet, yes. The Bruce Wayne, yep, that's hard to get. The Deep Sea, that's not really that wanted. The Sky Dweller, look, he's got the Sky Dweller with the white gold bezel and the black dial. Yeah, that's reasonably wanted there. The Daytona is a star. That's a Zenith Daytona, quite a valuable piece. But I wouldn't be doing vintage. He's got a Kermit, which a Kermit is actually, this is the pre-ceramic. I'm talking Kermit. So it's nice to have the Cermet and the Kermit. Then he's got the Omega Speedmaster, Man on the Moon. Okay, that's a great watch, but it's they're kind of mass-produced. It's not a super watch, okay? The Tudor GMT, ditto. It's kind of, it's a cool watch, but the Grand Seiko, yeah, and the PAM, I got to tell you, if you're going to do a deal to buy something, you've got to get rid of the dog shit. The dog shit in his collection is the PAM, the Tudor GMT, and the Grand Seiko, and maybe the Speedmaster Man on the Moon. That's the low spec of the collection. I wouldn't be getting rid of the Cermet. And vintage is such a minefield. I mean, if I said to him, I quoted him a reference about James Dowling. He didn't know who James Dowling was. It just, James Dowling wrote the book, the best of Rolex wristwatches and unauthorized history. That was by Dowling and Hess, and he's considered it was a very well regarded sort of book there. So I've got to be totally honest with you. There's a lot of his collection there. I think he's crazy to go into the 1680s. You've got to do it. A 1680 is something you've got to tread carefully on. You're paying a high price. There's so much downside. Why not just keep the Cermet? The other problem is you buy a 1680 red, it's not going to be as versatile as the Cermet. For starters, the dial is where a lot of value is. It's in the dial. You damage the dial or something goes wrong, and all of a sudden I gotta tell you guys, it is absolute disaster. It is absolute disaster. So I would seriously say there, guys, I would say be very careful. Vintage, you can't just because it's a Submariner doesn't mean you can go diving and start using it. You damage that watch. It's you got to remember, this is coming up 40, 50-year-old watch. It's going to be delicate, and you can't treat it like when it was new spec, because that was a long time ago. This is a vintage piece. Just because it's a sports vintage doesn't mean you can, I wouldn't swim with it, definitely not. Because it's very valuable. You damage the dial, you've killed the value. And I hope you understand where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to dissuade vintage, but you have to go into vintage very carefully. It is a minefield for the uninitiated. So my advice was keep the sermon. That was my advice. If you want to get into vintage, I said to him, get classics. Classics being ceramic, pre-ceramic. Sorry, classics being sapphire, pre-ceramic. And this was the advice I gave him. I don't know if he's going to listen. I try my best. That's about all I can do. Guys, I'm Archie Luxury. Like, subscribe, and tell your friends. Don't be afraid to put some comments down below. And I will see you in the next one. Guys, if you haven't done a paid review, I'd really like you to do one for me. I can't survive on the Google Ads. I desperately need some paid reviews. And I will catch you in the next one.
All these neck just wanna be a mini me. All these neck just wanna be a mini me. All these neck just wanna be a mini me. Feeling me, any me. All these neck just wanna be a mini me. All these neck just wanna be a mini me. All these neck just wanna be a mini me. Feeling me, any me. All these neck just wanna be a mini me. All these neck just wanna be a mini me. All these neck just wanna be a mini me. Feeling me, any me. All these neck just wanna be a mini me. All these neck just wanna be a mini me. All these neck.
Like, subscribe, and tell your friends, and don't be afraid to get a paid review. $50 for a paid review. It helps me stay full-time on YouTube, and I will see you in the next one. $50 paid review. I can't survive on Google Ads. I need your support. And guys, you could also sponsor me on Patreon. Patreon allows you to pay as little as $1 a month to keep me on YouTube. Hey guys, Archie Luxury. Who do I recommend for watches in Brisbane and Sydney? Vintage Watch Co. That's correct. Vintage Watch Co. in Brisbane Arcade in Brisbane and the Strand Arcade in Sydney. Vintage Watch Co. Brisbane and Sydney. Ronnie, I've known him since the late 90s. Ronnie is a top bloke. Luke is a great guy. Vintage Watch Co. That is who I recommend in Australia. Check out Vintage Watch Co. and the guys' amazing range of watches. They also do service and repairs. Vintage Watch Co. That is where the Pontiff goes. You know, some of my Pateks came from Vintage Watch Co. That's right, guys. Vintage Watch Co.